Matt, many of the problems facing our neighborhoods have to do with gangs. So what can be done to minimize those gangs? One group is taking on that challenge. Joining us is Pastor Robert Rand from the group From Gangs to Grace. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm glad you're here because this is a big issue. I can't tell you how many times I cover stories, and sure enough, 9 times out of 10 it has to do with gangs. What do you tell some of these kids that you approach and you want to turn their lives around? I mean, what can you say to them to convince them that, hey, this isn't the way to do it?
Well, one of the things that we do is we try to initiate hope into their lives. A lot of the young people have been told that they're garbage and they're not worthy, that their life is worthless. So what we do is we try to give them a more positive approach. We come to them and tell them they are something, that God created them with a purpose. Because we believe all children were created with a special purpose and a destiny that God put for them to fulfill. And I believe that what we do is we come and we proclaim the gospel of Christ. You know, and that's the only thing we believe that can change the life of a person that's becoming hardened by the streets.
And Robert, you yourself, you used to be a former gang member. Tell me about that. How long ago, and what was your life like?
Well, I think one of the things that attracted me to the gangs when I was a young man was I thought I was going to get rich selling drugs. So the attractiveness of having, because I grew up in a poor family, the attractiveness of having a nice car, lots of women, living a real high-profile life, really
do you think that's the same for most of the kids? They do it because they think they're going to get rich, or they're going to...
I think that's one aspect of it. There's several aspects of kids wanting to get involved in gangs. I think one is women play a big part of it. I think that when the gang recruiters come out to the streets and they approach the young person who's like, they start like 11, 12, 13 years old, and they start showing them, hey, a lot of little young women like you, then the kid becomes attracted to that. They start telling them how powerful they'll become. And then they'll tell them how much money they'll make if they start selling drugs. So these are attractions that make the child, but the reality to that is far from what they're teaching and telling these kids. The reality is a lot of these young people, they go to prison. They go to mental institutions. You know, they become crippled from street warfare. They talk about a brotherhood in gangs. But when people are in prison, they're lonely, they're by themselves. Nobody really cares about them. They're almost forgotten.
How did you get out of it?
Well, I think that the reason why I got out of gangs is because...
something must have clicked in your head, right? That said, this is not going to work so good.
Well, I think what clicked in my head is somebody brought to me the Lord Jesus Christ. And I think that they ministered to my life. And I think at that moment in my life, there was a decision. I think every one of us, no matter what part of life we come from, comes to a point in our life where we have to make a decision, whether we're going to choose to serve God or whether we're going to say, nah, God's not for me, and we're going to continue to live the way we're living.
Had anything led you to that? Meaning, had something happened with, I guess, your gang members, or something happened in your gang life that made something click or made something switch?
Well, I wouldn't say something happened as far as that. I think that the reality starts setting in. You know, mind you, at that point, I was about 20 years old, and I think that the realities that I thought were going to come to pass wasn't coming to pass, and that everything that I believed to be true was a lie.
So sometimes it takes time, meaning the older they get, they start to realize that this isn't the way to do it.
Right. I think that after seeing so many of your friends die, strung out on cocaine, you know, die of diseases, you know, going to mental institutions, I think after a while you realize it's a facade. It's an unattainable dream that none of us will ever catch.
I want to ask you something else real quick before we give people the information on Gangs to Grace. How difficult is it for a child, a teenager who's in a gang to then get out of it once they've been in it for a year or 2 years? I mean, do they get a lot of just sort of bad calls from the gang that they're in telling them to stay in?
No, absolutely not. If a gang member, a young person, is really, it's the level of commitment that this young man has. If he's sincere about his commitment that he wants to get away from the gangs, let's say, to serve Christ.
Because let me give you an example real quick, and I know we're running out of time, but I've covered stories where there's been a teenager who is in the process of trying to get away from the gang, and the gang comes after him and eventually may shoot and kill this individual.
I mean, from my experience of what I've seen on the streets, I don't think that's a possibility. I think that what has happened is the young man probably did something to that gang, and then now he's trying to get away because he done breached some type of trust within the gang, and now they're after him. But I think that if you initially, with a good heart, you've been on the streets, you've been, you know, committed to the gang, and all of a sudden you feel a change in your life, ultimately, if they came to us and said, hey, we would go to bat for them.
Okay.
But we'd have a conversation.
Let's get the information up on the screen, because you do have seminars where you sort of teach people how to stay away from this gang life. The information is New Life Covenant Church. It's 2701 West North Avenue. The number 773-384-7113, and the internet site is mynewlife.org. I really appreciate you being here, Robert. Thank you very much.